The question brought before the altar is this: YHWH, is it true in Enoch chapter 39, our soul gave permission to be born in this life? The first drawn word is Psalms chapter 18, verse 34. He teaches my hands to war, so that a bow of steel is broken by my arms. That opening word sets the tone. It is not a quiet permission. It is preparation. The yes in this reading is not a signed paper from the soul. It is a life formed under YHWH's hand. The text speaks of hands taught for conflict, and that tells us something about the birth we are asking after. The question has the shape of a soul choosing to enter, but the word answers with a life being trained. The lead verse also says the bow of steel is broken by my arms. That is not cruelty. The breaking of the bow is the removal of a weapon. The yes is not a yes to mere existence. It is a yes to being taught, to being made useful for the covenant. The life into which the soul is born is a life in which the enemy's weapon is broken by hands that YHWH has trained. The mathematical reading confirms an affirmative direction. The pattern is strong, all gates pass, and the deterministic answer is yes. The triple convergence of identity, inheritance, and priesthood rises far above the baseline. The covenant polarity is affirmative. These numbers do not prove a private fact about a particular soul in Enoch chapter 39. They confirm that the drawn words cluster around covenant identity, appointed inheritance, and priestly consecration. That is the field in which this question is answered. The text gives birth language close to the question. In Genesis chapter 46, verse 20, we hear that to Joseph in the covenant inheritance land of Egypt were born Manasseh and Ephraim, and their mother was Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. That verse holds birth, inheritance, and priesthood together in one household. It does not say the children gave permission. It says they were born into a covenant inheritance. That is the better frame. The soul is not first a negotiator. The soul is first a gift given into a story that already has a land, a covenant, and a priestly line. Numbers chapter 34 verse 6 says, "As for the western border, you will have the great sea for a border. This will be your west border." That sounds like geography, but it is a word about appointed limits. A border is not a permission, it is a placement. The soul does not give itself a border. The soul is placed within one. YHWH sets the west border and the east border, and the soul is born inside the covenant land that was already measured. The question asks about permission, but the text answers with appointment. Permission is something you grant. Appointment is something you receive. Galatians chapter 3, verse 22, speaks the same truth more sharply. The scripture has concluded all under covenant violation, but the covenant promise by faith of Joshua Messiah might be given to them that believe. Here the entry into the promise is not by prior merit. It is by faith in the faithful one. The covenant promise is given. That word given matters. If there was a permission from the soul, it was not the first cause. The mercy of YHWH was first. The text keeps pointing away from a private contract and toward a public covenant. The question names Enoch chapter 39, but the draw does not open that chapter directly. What the draw does give is Enoch material that speaks of a fountain of covenant faithfulness, of the holy ones above uniting in prayer, and of the elect dwelling with the faithful. In that company, there is no record of a soul signing a permission. There is a record of the holy ones asking, blessing, and waiting on YHWH. That is a meaningful difference. The yes is not located in a private act before birth. It is located in a covenant company that already prays for the faithful on the earth. This is not a denial of the soul's dignity. It is a correction of the soul's position. The soul is not the author of its own entry. The soul is the recipient of a mercy that preceded it. The numbers strengthen the same reading. The strongest single channel is inheritance. Identity, inheritance, and priesthood fire together at a level the analysis calls transcendence. The anomaly detection is strong enough to survive correction. When the patterns are shuffled and tested again, the signal does not disappear. The recommendation is to test again in future draws. The answer is not in doubt as a pattern reading, but the math has a limit. It does not verify that a specific event happened or did not happen outside the drawn text. It verifies that the draw is not random and that the direction is affirmative. That is enough to say yes, and enough to know what kind of yes it is. Attention must be named. None of the drawn verses is Enoch chapter 39 itself. The Enoch material that appears elsewhere in the draw speaks of a fountain of covenant faithfulness, of the holy ones above uniting in prayer, and of the elect dwelling with the faithful. But the specific chapter is not quoted. So the yes lands on the wider hope of origin by covenant mercy, not on a direct proof of the exact clause. That is not a weakness. It keeps the answer honest. We can hear the pastoral word this way. The soul is not a consumer choosing a life. The soul is a covenant child appointed to an inheritance. The life into which you were born is a life in which your hands are being taught, even for conflict, even for what you did not choose. The permission you long to settle may not be found in a moment before birth. It is found in the covenant mercy that saved us by the bathing of new birth and the renewing of the sacred spirit. That is the shape of the yes. Birth here is mercy, not a works transaction. The word of the new birth is mercy from YHWH, not a wage owed to the soul. So the direct answer to the question is yes. Yes, in the sense that the reading is affirmative. Yes, that your origin is held in covenant identity, inheritance, and priesthood. Yes, that the pattern of the words is strong and all gates pass. But let the yes be carried gently. The first verse says your hands are taught for war. The yes includes a formation, not only a comfort. It includes an inheritance appointed before you could ask. It includes a birth that was mercy before it was decision. The ark has entered the camp. We name that with reverence, not leverage. We do not turn the markers into a final voice. We stand between the porch and the altar and say what the words say. The words say yes, but they say yes in the voice of covenant mercy, given before any permission was ever granted. The lead verses drawn in this altar of reception session were Psalms chapter 18, verse 34, Leviticus chapter 11, verse 17 to 19, 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 3, Numbers chapter 34, verse 6, Genesis chapter 46, verse 20, Galatians chapter 3, verse 22. 94 further verses were drawn in this session. This concludes today's interpretation at the altar of reception. Package YouTube metadata following the script. Television title: Altar of Reception. YHWH. Is it true in Enoch chapter 39? Our Psuche gave permission to. Memo description. Hashtags are at the bottom. YHWH Shalom. Altar Reception 17.1 5.9 Cryptographic Signal Receiver. Question: YHWH. Is it true in Enoch chapter 39? Our Psuche gave permission to be born in this life? The question brought before the altar is this: YHWH. Is it true in Enoch chapter 39? Our soul gave permission to be born in this life? The first drawn word is Psalms chapter 18, verse 34. He teaches my hands to war, so that a bow of steel is broken by my arms. That opening word sets the tone. It is not a quiet permission. It is preparation. The yes in this reading is not a signed paper from the soul. It is a life formed under YHWH's hand. The text speaks of hands taught for conflict, and that tells us something about the birth we are asking after. The question has the shape of a soul choosing to enter, but the word answers with a life being trained. The lead verse say, full spoken interpretation in the video. Thank you for listening at the altar of reception. Hashtag altar of reception, hashtag YHWH Shalom, hashtag biblical signal, hashtag divine draw, hashtag you is it true.